Discover the amazing transformation of this grandma, a touching story of unexpected inspiration. Margaret stood silently in her kitchen, the faint scent of freshly brewed coffee mingling with her unease. A long shadow filled the room as she glanced toward the framed pictures on the wall, her husband's smiling face grinning back at her from another time. The day stretched long now that he was gone, and here she was, battling the weight of solitude in a world that spun faster each day. Her grandchildren, glued to their screens, seemed to move in a realm that felt foreign to her, digital, bright, and ever-changing. The more they embraced the new, the more Margaret felt like a ghost in her own life. Rummaging through her late mother's attic a few chilly afternoons later, Margaret sifted through the dust-covered boxes pushed deep in the corner. The memories of family drifted in her mind, but what truly seized her attention were the vibrant paintings her mother had created long ago. Each piece captured raw emotion, color spilling from the canvas as if the painting itself breathed through her mother's hands. Her heart fluttered, waking something nestled deep within her. Could she still create? Could she still be the artist she once dreamt of being amidst family duties that had dulled her passions? With renewed determination, Margaret signed up for a community art class. Excitement fluttered inside her, quickly twisted into uncertainty by the skepticism she sensed among her younger classmates. Their dismissive glances ignited doubt, each whisper puncturing her enthusiasm. She hesitated, questioning whether she belonged in this world of vibrant creativity that felt several ticks away from her own. What was all to her felt useless to them, and in the face of their indifference, Margaret's resolve began to quaver. The old ghost stirred as she wrestled with her paintbrush, wrestling also with the insecurities swirling inside her mind. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who is on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Every stroke on the canvas became a confrontation with her life, a dialogue with her mother, her family, and the dichotomy of age versus the desperation to belong. Her passion poured out in pieces that held whispers of her history. Yet, the gallery of thoughts weighing on her heart grew heavier with each shared work in class, leading to heated debates about what it meant to create in today's world. Was her experience now reduced to the faded echoes of nostalgia? Just as despair began to claw at her insides, the miraculous news arrived: one of her paintings was selected for a local exhibit. A turning point, yes, but shadows still loomed. The tension with her younger peers intensified, their jealousy and misconceptions thickening the air. Would showcasing her work unveil her uncertainties or showcase her resilience? As the date approached, Margaret's heart raced with conflicting impulses. Would she rise and reclaim her identity or remain shackled to insecurity? Standing before her canvas, staring at the swirling colors mimicking her tumultuous feelings, she didn't know if she was ready to meet the expectations of the world outside. Yet, something deeper beckoned her to venture forth. It was time to face the truth about herself, but would this collision with her past tear her down or build her anew? The answer loomed like an unfinished brushstroke on the edge of her canvas, waiting, heavy with potential. As the day of the exhibit loomed closer, the cacophony within Margaret intensified, echoing the chaos of her thoughts. Each morning brought her to the canvas, paintbrush in hand, yet the fear of judgment seeped into her heart, threatening to stifle the very creativity she sought to reclaim. Her reflection in the glass of the framed pictures flickered, the vibrant memories of youth contrasting sharply with the waning light of her present. She was not just displaying a painting, she was exposing her soul. Late one evening, as she closed the door to her studio after a long session, doubts circled like vultures. Her children might see her efforts as quaint, even pathetic. Incidents from class surged back, those rolling eyes when she introduced her techniques drawn from an era gone by, the quiet chuckles when her hands trembled with each stroke. They were young, vibrant, and modern. Were these the creators of a new world? What did she have to offer beyond her years of experience, her faded ideas that no longer seemed relevant? Yet, when she uncapped a fresh tube of paint, the colors cascaded upon her palette like the vibrant burst of her memories. Margaret focused on her breathing, recalling the ways her mother infused emotion into every brushstroke. With each application of paint to canvas, patterns emerged that mirrored her own self-discovery. What if her art was not merely a response to her past but an avenue to redefine her present? Margaret returns to the paintings she had initially planned for the exhibit. She asked herself, what did she want to communicate beyond an image? Her heart recognized a deeper narrative within her tones, a tale of resilience, creativity rekindled against overwhelming odds. Slowly, she stitched together fragments of her spirit, merging the old with the new. For the first time in years, she felt invigorated. But it wasn't solely about her waiting canvas, it was the confrontation looming on the horizon, the chaotic intersection of past and present. At the class, the whispers had morphed into louder conversations, hiding the unspoken competition. She envisioned presenting her work, a vibrant amalgamation of joy and sorrow, hope and despair. Would this be a moment of validation or rejection? The tension crackled like static in the air as she prepared herself. The night before the display, a storm raged outside, mirroring the storm inside her. Flashbacks of laughter, family gatherings, and fleeting moments of pride filled her mind. They all settled within her, a reminder that creating was not just about aesthetic value, it was about pouring life into something that could resonate with other souls. In that moment, she made her decision. Rather than succumbing to the weight of judgment, she'd embrace the possibility of failure as an integral part of growth. If her peers dismissed her, it would not diminish her value or her voice. She could be a bridge between tradition and innovation, a unique perspective not bound by age. As dawn broke, illuminating her studio with soft, inviting light, Margaret finished the last details on her painting. She stood before it, the colors vibrant and alive, promising a story untold. Her heart raced not with fear, but with anticipation. This was her moment to articulate a narrative that defiantly rejected ephemerality. Yet as she sealed the package for the exhibit, her phone buzzed with a message from one of her classmates, a critical inquiry about her piece's depth. Tension flooded her veins again, reminding her that the real exhibit might not be just the artwork itself. It was also the confrontation she had been avoiding, a testament to her strength as she prepared to face a generation questioning her place in this bold new world. Would she seize this opportunity to forge her path unapologetically? Or would doubt wrap its tendrils around her once more, signaling the return of that ghost she so desperately wanted to escape? The morning of the exhibit dawned with a clarity that felt almost surreal. Margaret stood before her canvas, the vibrant colors now seeming to shimmer with a life of their own. She observed them, not as a collection of paint, but as remnants of her journey, each stroke a testament to her perseverance and desire for expression. Yet with each glance, the undercurrent of anxiety surged within her. What decisions might today bring, and what judgments awaited? Her mind replayed the fervent message from her classmate, its looming significance reminding her of the potential for confrontation. Who would ask her to justify the essence behind the tapestry of colors? What words would she summon when questioned about the depths of her creativity? The dilemma stirred unease within her, uncertainty clashed with her newfound resolve. As she loaded her car with her artwork, the act felt symbolic. She was not merely transporting pieces meant for display, she was carrying fragments of her identity, pieces of the past interwoven with a vision of the future. Each brushstroke whispered a narrative she longed to share, yearning for recognition and validation. Arriving at the venue, she paused in the parking lot, her heart racing at the sight of her peers bustling like bees amid the hive. They were the epitome of youthful vigor, their enthusiasm pulsating in the air. As she stepped into the gallery, Laughter and idle chatter buzzed around her, yet Margaret felt as if there was an invisible barrier between her and this vibrant scene. How had she grown so distant from the dynamic energy she once embraced? The stark white walls of the gallery, adorned with modern art, seemed to mock her traditional mentality. With each passing moment, the imposter syndrome wrapped more tightly around her, dragging her insights into the shadows. Framed paintings glared at her, each expertly crafted canvas showcasing the boldness she aspired to emulate yet feared to replicate in her own way. Margaret found herself questioning her place in this array of talent. What was she really adding to the narrative? Was her art relevant, or was it the mere nostalgia of bygone years? With a deep breath, she clutched her portfolio tighter, thoughtful hum coursing through her. Perhaps her challenge lay not in fitting within the prevailing trends, but in infusing her experience into a voice that could speak in a new context. In a quiet corner of the gallery, she spotted her classmates discussing her work, their tones blended with curiosity and skepticism. An impulse to retreat stirred within her, but she reminded herself that this moment meant more than just exposing her art, it represented a confrontation with herself. Could she silence the self-doubt long enough to own her narrative? As the exhibit opened, people began to gather around her paintings, the murmurs swelling into a palpable anticipation. Each glance and turn of their heads ignited her urgency to connect, to bridge the gap between their expectations and her truth. Suddenly, a familiar face appeared in the crowd, a fellow artist who had often expressed disdain for Margaret's perspective. Their eyes locked momentarily, and the unspoken challenge hung thickly in the air. A mix of dread and determination coursed through her as she realized this was her moment to transform vulnerability into strength. With resolve hardening in her chest, Margaret stepped closer to her work amidst the flurry of voices. Here lay her opportunity to weave stories and share her journey openly, to reclaim her space in a world that constantly questioned her merit. The dialogue within her escalated as she prepared to confront not only her peers but also her own beliefs of worthiness and creativity. The question weighing at the forefront of her mind: could she rise above criticism and claim her artistic identity in the face of opposition? As she approached the group, energy surged through her, igniting an undeniable spark. This was about more than the artwork itself. She felt the potential to evolve in ways she never thought possible. But just as she was ready to speak, a harsh comment from her critic shattered her confidence. Would this disrupt everything she had built in those quiet moments of solitude? Or could she harness this challenge, turning it into a revelation for herself and her classmates alike? Margaret froze, the words stinging more deeply than she anticipated. The critic's disdainful laughter cut through the electric atmosphere, casting a shadow over her carefully curated moment. In that heartbeat, the confidence she had been nurturing with every brushstroke felt paper-thin, ready to tear at the first sign of wind. Yet, as her breath hitched in her throat, a flicker of defiance ignited within her. This moment was not merely a potential downfall, it was a crucible, one that might forge her into the artist she aspired to become. She remembered the solitary nights spent lost in the rhythm of her paints, the aching beauty of vulnerability on the canvas. These had been the true masterpieces, imperfections and all. Gathering her resolve, Margaret stepped closer to her artwork, the vibrant hues reflecting an inner fire she hadn't fully acknowledged before. If the critic wanted a justification, perhaps that was exactly what she would give, not from a place of defensiveness, but from a wellspring of authenticity. Art, she began, her voice steady despite her trembling hands, is a dialogue. It's not about the perfection of technique, but the sincerity of expression. Each stroke here is steeped in my experiences. The colors resonate with my fears, my joys, my lessons. She observed the shift in her classmates' expressions. Curiosity began to replace skepticism, and the tension shifted like a breeze through an open window. As she spoke, Margaret felt the fear begin to dissolve, thread by thread. The burden of expectation was now a shield, invigorating rather than depleting. She embraced the opportunity to present a narrative that intertwined her past influences with her present realities. Her voice grew more confident as she articulated how she had strived to capture moments of resilience, how, as a woman of a generation often overlooked, she dared to present insights rooted in authenticity and vulnerability. In the back of her mind, a new awareness started to blossom. This wasn't solely about the artwork or the validation of her peers, it was her personal awakening. Her fears were just that, her fears. The ridicule of her classmate lost its power as she focused on the small group forming around her, fascinated by the narrative she wove. Then came another realization: the possibility of discovery lay not just in her words, but in the vulnerability of sharing her truth. A lurking sense of pride began to overshadow her anxiety as she explained the inspirations behind each piece. She recalled the obscure moments of beauty in her mundane routine. Each painting was a small rebellion against the noise of self-doubt, a voiced existence in a world that often silenced the subtler truths. As heads nodded among her listeners, she caught glimpses of empathy and understanding reflected back. Perhaps this journey didn't have to be solitary after all. The personal revelations flowed, revealing depth she hadn't anticipated. She was not merely an artist but a chronicler of life's hidden nuances. But as the crowd around her began to engage, a sudden pang of realization hit. There would always be detractors. They would always exist, pointing fingers and casting doubt. Would she be able to stand firm each time she faced that critical gaze? Could she consistently push forward, fortifying her voice in a world that often leaned toward harsh judgment? With a newfound steadiness, Margaret allowed her fear to coexist with her triumph, weaving them into the tapestry of her artistic identity. The time had come to face the greater battle, one that would test her resilience and her commitment to authenticity every step of the way. As the energy of the conversation swelled, the critic remained silent, swirling doubts consuming their own perspective as they listened. In that moment, Margaret recognized her true adversaries were not external, but the doubts harbored within her own mind. Where would this journey lead her next? The seeds of determination were now nestled in her soul. She caught her breath, ready to take the next step into her evolving identity. And with renewed purpose, she felt the pull of her artistic ambition strengthen. Margaret was ready to explore a newfound depth of connection between her art, her voice, and the world around her. What awaited her just beyond the gallery door? The journey of transformation was only just beginning. As the conversation continued to blossom around her, Margaret felt a rush of exhilaration mixed with apprehension. The gallery, a sanctuary that had once brimmed with creative potential, was now becoming a crucible for her transformation. She could sense the momentum shifting, and yet, an echoing apprehension lingered at the edges of her consciousness, a reminder of how fragile this burgeoning confidence truly was. Would her newfound voice survive outside these walls? The prospect of stepping into the broader world, one filled with critics and naysayers, was daunting. An unsettling thought nagged at her: what if the walls of this intimate space crumbled the moment she faced external judgment again? With each word she shared, Margaret took meticulous note of her surroundings. She scanned the faces before her, searching for signs of authenticity in their expressions. Here was a community of aspiring artists, each seeking validation or grappling with similar doubts. Would it be possible to forge connections outside this moment? To transform this intimate engagement into allies in her artistic journey? Margaret. Came a voice, the critic who had initially derided her work. The classmate's expression was inscrutable, but tension crackled in the air. I must admit, your perspective has changed how I think about art. But aren't we also accountable for honing our skills? Can vulnerability truly stand in the face of technical shortcomings? The question hung in the air, a challenge that felt both liberating and constricting. Did skill and authenticity need to be mutually exclusive? Margaret's heart quickened as she fought back against the instinct to retreat. Now, more than ever, she understood that growth involved facing uncomfortable inquiries. Absolutely, she asserted, her voice gaining strength from her conviction. Art does require technique, but that is just one layer of a much richer tapestry. My vulnerability allows me to connect on another level, one that transcends mere technique. The heart of my work is to echo what others may overlook. Isn't that what we, as artists, aspire to do? The shift was palpable. The critic blinked, caught off guard by her passionate rebuttal. Around her, the others leaned in, their engagement surging forward in the wake of her conviction. Margaret felt a flicker of hope ignite amidst the turmoil of her mind. Perhaps this exchange was more than a rebuttal, it was an opportunity to further examine her motivations, to challenge her own understanding of her artistic role. She could feel herself undergoing a metamorphosis, where doubt and self-assurance began to dance together, each illuminating the other. Outside the gallery window, the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows on the pavement. The day's twilight felt symbolic, a strong reminder that new beginnings often emerge from the depths of uncertainty. But daylight faded, night approached, and with it, inevitable change. Would you consider collaborating on a project? The critic asked, and the suggestion hit Margaret like a bolt of lightning. Here was a bridge to cross, a chance for synergy rather than conflict. What if she could use this budding relationship to explore her artistic vision further? With a deep breath, she thought of the possibilities that lay ahead. To collaborate meant not just a blending of techniques, but an opportunity for dialogue, a way to fuse her vulnerability with technical mastery. It was a promise of growth, a vow to push past the fear of external judgment, and to cultivate the very connections she craved. Suddenly, Margaret felt emboldened by the prospect of integrating her artistic struggles with newfound alliances. Yet uncertainty fueled her. What would it mean to partner with someone who had once challenged her? Could this collaboration lead to the breakthrough she sought, or would it further complicate her already tangled path of self-discovery? As the final conversations drew to a close, Margaret recognized she stood at a crucial crossroads. This moment presented a choice, not just to collaborate, but to redefine her relationship with art, and with those who shaped her world. What would her commitment to collaboration reveal about her, and how far could it take her on her transformative journey? The question loomed heavy in her mind, marking the beginning of an exploration that would test the very limits of her courage and creativity. Margaret's heart raced as she left the gallery, the cool night air biting against her skin. The sky above was a tapestry of deep blues and purples, mirroring the turmoil within her. The invitation to collaborate rattled around in her mind, a tantalizing possibility that teased her with visions of growth and connection. But the shadow of doubt clung desperately, whispering that this was a fleeting moment, one that could dissolve as quickly as it had appeared. She recalled the critic's words, so laden with challenge, and felt them seeping into her thoughts. She needed to confront her own abilities. Was her intuition strong enough to stand alongside technical mastery? Did she truly have something valuable to contribute? The flickering street lamps cast shadows that danced around her, echoing her wavering confidence. At home, she faced her canvas, blank and intimidating, mocking her uncertainty. As she picked up her brush, her hands trembled slightly. The vibrant hues that usually flowed so effortlessly now seemed held at bay, entangled in her mind's web of fear. Margaret closed her eyes, inhaling deeply, recalling the warmth of her earlier conversation. She remembered the intrigue in her classmates' eyes when she spoke passionately, the way their engagement shifted as she embraced her vulnerability. What if she poured that vulnerability into her art? What if, instead of shying away from her fears, she confronted them head-on? The thought ignited a flicker of determination. Margaret resolved that her first step in collaboration would be to paint not for others but for herself. This work would be an exploration of her own journey, the intersection of raw emotion and her budding technical skill. The next morning, Margaret awoke with a clarity she'd rarely encountered. She structured a plan, sketching ideas, writing down her thoughts, and setting aside time for spontaneous explorations of her art. She would invite the critic into her workspace not as a competition but as a partner in discovery. This was about bridging gaps, not creating walls. With each brushstroke, she transformed her doubts into a visual language, layering colors and textures that hinted at pain, perseverance, and possibilities. The synergy began to emerge. As she worked, the dialogue within her mind shifted, the critic's challenge morphed from a threatening voice into that of a constructive partner, urging her to delve deeper. But Margaret faced an inevitable challenge balancing her artistic vision with someone else's perspective. Would she feel compromised? Would she allow their ideas to overshadow her own? The question pulsated in her mind: what would it mean to retain her essence in this collaboration? Days passed as Margaret prepared for her meeting with the critic. She knew he wanted to explore the technical aspects alongside the emotional depth, which was both exciting and nerve-wracking. She needed to share her vision without succumbing to apprehension. Yet, each moment of preparation drew her closer to the precipice, teetering between the exhilarating potential of collaboration and the haunting fear of inadequacy. On the night of their first meeting, as she set up her studio, she wrestled with the impulse to pull back, to hide her drafts away from view. What if he were critical? What if he didn't understand her vision? But as she arranged her space, cleaning brushes and mixing colors, Margaret realized that this moment was not just about his validation. This was a chance to embrace the entirety of her journey, to push her boundaries and invite scrutiny, not as a foe but as a catalyst for growth. When he arrived, the mere sight of the critic reignited her nerves, yet Margaret felt a spark of clarity. She made her choice, to embrace her fears openly and share her unfolding story and vision. Their dialogue would shape her art, and together, they could explore the delicate balance between vulnerability and technique. As they exchanged ideas and hesitations, Margaret recognized that she was once again standing at a new threshold. This collaboration could redefine not just her work but her entire approach to art. The moment hovered between excitement and trepidation, promising to unravel new depths of creativity. Little did they know, however, that this partnership would unravel unexpected threads buried deep within their own psyches, a confrontation both of artistic innovation and personal revelation. Would they emerge stronger, or would they stumble amidst the complexities of honesty and expectation? Her heart raced at the thought of what lay ahead, the inkling of transformation swirling around her like the paint on her canvas. Margaret felt a nervous excitement ripple through her as she set down her brush and turned to face the critic, whose presence filled the studio with an almost palpable tension. She took a deep breath, grounding herself in the moment. His gaze was intense, scanning the canvases that represented her internal struggles and emerging courage. Would he appreciate the rawness she had poured into her work, or dissect it clinically? "Let us start with this one," he said, gesturing towards the canvas swirling with hues of red and deep blue. As he began to speak, Margaret felt a new energy ignite within her, a blending of apprehension and anticipation. He analyzed the brushwork, the emotional undercurrents she had tried to convey. As his words poured forth, she found herself listening intently, not just to his critique but to the underlying stories within them. His perspective was sharp, illuminating aspects she had overlooked in her own reflections. "What I see here is a journey," he continued, his voice steady yet inquisitive. "But it feels unfinished. You're holding back, afraid to fully expose the depths of what you're feeling." His observation struck a nerve, a reminder of her old habits of self-censorship and fear of judgment. For a moment, embarrassment washed over her, but she quickly transformed that embarrassment into resolve. "If I'm going to be vulnerable, I need to be willing to dig deeper," Margaret thought, the realization setting off a cascade of internal determination. "Can you walk me through what inspired this choice of color?" he challenged, leaning in as if to draw her into the depths of her own creation. She hesitated, her instinct telling her to retreat, but recalling her earlier resolve to embrace vulnerability only pushed her to step forward. This, she began carefully, is about the chaos I feel within myself. The juxtaposition of despair and hope. I wanted to illustrate the conflict I face in my own life. As she articulated her thoughts, Margaret noted the shift in the critic's demeanor. His skepticism began to fade, replaced by curiosity. Their exchange shifted from a simple critique to a deeper exploration of her identity and vision. The line separating student and mentor blurred, the dialogue transforming into a collaboration of ideas. With each brushstroke they discussed, Margaret felt her confidence swell. The critic was not there to impose but to guide. She allowed herself to spark discussions about their artistic philosophies, exposing her thoughts and uncertainties as if peeling back layers of paint. Vulnerability can be powerful, he said thoughtfully, mirroring her earlier reflections. It's an invitation for the viewer to connect. They flowed through various ideas, experimenting with colors that scared her, techniques she had never thought to employ. Margaret felt liberated by his guidance. She was daring to uncover parts of herself she had buried behind fear. Yet, shadows danced around her mind. Could she sustain this newfound vulnerability as they continued to navigate technique? With each potential breakthrough, she found herself checking back in with her emotional compass, battling the instinct to constrict her true self for the sake of a refined exterior. Next, I'd like us to experiment with abstraction, he suggested with enthusiasm. Margaret's heart raced at the thought. Abstraction felt much like exposing herself to a storm. A chaos that could destroy the carefully curated images she had spent years crafting. Did she have the courage to strip away the layers and expose her raw self? That was the challenge looming ahead, a dance of courage and artistry. As the sun set, casting a warm glow through the studio windows, Margaret glanced at the canvases surrounding her. Each one now felt like a chapter of a larger story. The initial fear that had frozen her hands was transforming into a driving force, propelling her to confront the ambiguity of her emotions and the vast possibilities of her art. The critic leaned closer, an uncharacteristic spark of excitement in his eyes. Are you ready for the next level? To fully embrace your unpredictable emotions? Margaret locked eyes with him, a silent agreement resonating between them. They were indeed on the cusp of something extraordinary, bound together in this quest of transformation. But would she allow herself to dive headfirst into the unpredictable world of abstraction? Or would her doubts pull her back into familiar safe zones? As these questions lingered, she took a deep breath, bracing herself for the exhilarating leap into the unknown ahead. Margaret stood before the blank canvas, breath caught in her throat, a tapestry of fears and aspirations swirling within her. The whisper of abstraction beckoned, promising both liberation and chaos. She wavered, navigating through the conflicting urges of safety and the inherent risks that came with revealing her true self. Would she let the colors spill forth from her heart unfiltered, or would she falter, reverting to the predictable strokes of her past? Let's begin, the critic encouraged, his enthusiasm a warm blanket against her frigid uncertainty. Each brushstroke had the potential to unravel her neatly tied narratives, exposing the rawness and complexities that resided beneath the surface. Drawing in a deep breath, she dipped her brush into vibrant yellows and deep blacks, contrasting tones that terrified yet intrigued her. As she laid down the first strokes on the canvas, a sense of urgency surged within, igniting a fire she didn't know had smoldered for so long. Focus on the emotion, not the form, he advised, stepping back to observe, his arms crossed thoughtfully. As she began layering colors, a symphony of hues that danced unrestrained, memories of past failures loomed large in her mind. The critique she had been so anxious about became a memory she worked through with each movement of the brush. What if it wasn't good enough? What if the chaos she now embraced only served to highlight her inadequacies? But as she let go of the need for perfection, allowing herself to dance with the paint, a flicker of exhilaration raced through her veins. The critic's presence, which had initially felt daunting, morphed into something akin to encouragement, a silent dialogue pushing her further into uncharted territories. "Remember that vulnerability invites connection," his voice echoed in her mind, a gentle reminder as she layered darker strokes over the lighter ones, merging conflict with harmony. The chaos on the canvas mirrored the tumult within, where thoughts battled for dominance. The fear of exposure prevented her from creating true art. A bead of sweat traced down her brow, and yet with each stroke, tension released its grip. It was a liberating sensation that transformed into determination. She began to trust herself, experimenting with aggressive swipes, bold and unrepentant. "This is about me," she whispered under her breath, channeling all her internal strife into this creation. As the composition unfolded, she spotted flashes of insight. The dark strokes could represent sorrow, the brighter colors hope. It was a visualization of her tumultuous journey. With each new layer, she pushed against the confines that dynamic abstraction promised, where each choice resonated with her evolving self. Margaret could feel the critic's gaze, not as a judgment but as an engagement, a shared experience in creative exploration. His nods of approval urged her on, unfamiliar but welcomed. This was a partnership, an exchange that fostered courage within her. And yet, a doubt flickered at the outer edges of her consciousness. Would this newfound boldness be enough? Would these layers, raw and exposed, be recognized for their merit? The aspiration to connect with the viewer pulled her into the depths of honesty, leaving her exposed. The clock ticked steadily, and Margaret continued painting, her movements quicker, more liberating. The merging of her past and present began to take shape, veering closer to something unsettling yet invigorating. But shadows of her former self nudged at the edges. Could she truly embrace the woman she was becoming? Would she be brave enough to exhibit this piece, vulnerable as it was, a raw window into her soul? As she stepped back to view her work, the frantic beat of her heart echoed in her ears. There it was, a testament to her journey, a dance of color and emotion. Could she stand behind this piece to share it with the world? The fear lingered, waiting to ensnare her once again, but beneath it lay a burgeoning fire of determination. With trembling hands, she contemplated her next move. Her resolve was tested anew. Would she remain shackled by fear, or push forward into the wild corners of her own spirit? The moment hung heavy in the air, waiting for her decision to materialize. Margaret took a deep breath, her eyes locked on the canvas, a silent confrontation with her own growth waiting to unfold. She was teetering on the brink of revelation, a step that could redefine not just her art but her very essence as an artist. But would this leap into authenticity strengthen her, or leave her vulnerable without a safety net? The choice loomed before her like the canvas itself, blank and ready. The moment stretched like the elastic of a well-worn canvas, and Margaret drew herself closer to the edge of that precipice, both terrifying and thrilling. Could she pour out all her unfiltered emotions, weaving them into a tapestry that would resonate with others, or would she succumb to her historical apprehensions? As she applied additional strokes to the thickening paint, her mind raced through the implications of exposure. What would it mean to share the tumult of her heart through art? The thought ignited a small flame of courage, rivaling the cold fear nipping at her resolve. This was not just painting, it was a declaration. A deep anxiousness settled over her, the very act of revealing one's inner self bore the weight of vulnerability. What if they don't understand? Her inner critic whispered insidiously, prompting a deepening unrest within her. Yet, a counter-voice emerged, urging her to remember that her choice was authentic. The colors played across the canvas were a dialogue with herself, a narrative that required no defense. Driven by the urgency of self-expression, she grabbed a palette knife, carving into her layers of paint rather than brushing over them. The jagged edges captured her struggle, her hesitation converted into precision. Each chip and scrape resonated with her choice to confront rather than retreat. The deeper she cut, the more liberated she felt, the chaotic beauty of her emotions challenged the tidy lines of her past. Amidst this revelation, she took a moment to step back, assessing her progress. She could see not just the dramatic swirls and clashes but a story unfolding. Elements of her identity, the vibrant yellows representing fleeting moments of joy, married together with the brooding blacks of fear and sorrow. Should she call it a dance of contrasts or a battle remembered? Each option felt equally valid, yet somehow, it all remained a reflection of her complex journey, a weaving of strength and fragility. As she worked with fervor, she felt the looming deadline of the upcoming exhibition like a visceral weight in her chest. The thought triggered a swell of anxiety: what if her efforts weren't sufficient? What if her truths laid bare on the canvas suffered at the hands of criticism once more? Each doubt felt like a pulse of ice, creeping upwards toward her resolution. But rather than succumbing, she envisioned the faces of the viewers, strangers craving connection and understanding, just as she did. They aren't here to judge, but to relate, she reminded herself, anchoring her anxieties in a shared human experience. This reframing shifted her focus, sparking a defiance within that propelled her forward. The act of creation became less performative, and more about her journey through personal strife and triumph. As the final layers thickened, a light bulb ignited within her, the realization that this piece was not just about her anymore. It was a gift, a bridge she could build to connect with other hearts navigating their darkness and light. This understanding redefined her brushwork, each stroke now imbued with intention and an insistence on authenticity. Margaret stepped back one last time, her breath hitching anew at the significance of her creation. This was more than just an exploration of emotion, it was her declaration. And in that instant, as colors began to merge on the surface, an intense conviction washed over her. Could it be that by standing firm in her truth, she might inspire even a single viewer to encounter their reflection in the artwork? The thought sent shivers down her spine, not of fear, but of an unexpected connection manifesting through creativity. Yet, even within this burst of clarity, a nagging thread of anxiety refused to be severed. What if her work fell flat? What if it didn't achieve that same emotional resonance she so desperately yearned for? The forthcoming reality of public exhibition loomed ahead, a vast sea of unknown, a moment teetering on the threshold of potential failure and transformative acceptance. With her heart hammering in her chest, Margaret stood at the cusp of her next move. Would she seize the courage to unveil this raw vulnerability before the world and risk the ridicule she had always dreaded? A choice loomed once again, pressing up against her burgeoning resolve as she prepared to cross into the realm of the public eye, where judgment danced closely with understanding and kindness. But beneath it all, a question flickered to life, demanding to be addressed: what truly lay waiting on the other side of her fear? As the day of the exhibit dawned, Margaret felt a surge of anticipation, drowning out the fears that had once paralyzed her. Standing before her completed painting, vibrant colors swirling in a dance of light and shadow, she was overcome by a sense of accomplishment. This was no longer merely a canvas, it had transformed into a monument of her journey, one marked by uncertainty, resilience, and the audacity to embrace herself fully. The art gallery buzzed with energy, peers milling about, displaying their respective pieces with confidence that had once seemed unattainable to her. Yet Margaret stood firm, the weight of her fears dissipating in the warm light of the space. Today, she wasn't just an aging artist grappling with obsolescence, she was an embodiment of connectedness, her struggles immortalized on the canvas begging for acknowledgement. As visitors began to gather, she caught snippets of conversation. Curious glances turned into excited whispers as they approached her piece, and for a fleeting moment, Margaret felt a wave of doubt. Would they see the emotional turmoil she had poured into her art? Would they appreciate the perpetual battle she waged against rejection? Then, a young woman stepped closer, examining the layers beneath the surface. "This is incredible," she said, her voice laced with genuine admiration. "You've captured something really profound here." Those words struck profound chords deep within Margaret. The validation she sought wasn't wrapped in accolades, but in shared understanding. Vulnerability wasn't her enemy, it was the bridge that connected her to others, transcending age and experience. As the crowd thickened, Margaret found herself engaging with an audience that defied her expectations. Some were seasoned art critics, others were amateur artists seeking inspiration. Each interaction was enriched by her newfound confidence, her voice steady as she narrated the stories behind her brushstrokes, the joy mingled with sorrow, the resilience threaded through each color. But the most stirring moment unfolded when the young critic, who had questioned her work in class, approached her. "I didn't understand it before," he admitted, sincerity radiating from his gaze. "But now I see. The chaos you've poured into this piece speaks volumes." Seeing a flicker of recognition in his eyes resonated within her, a deep confirmation that her commitment to authenticity was indeed transformative, not just for herself, but for those around her. They shared a moment of connection, a silent acknowledgement that her vulnerability had disarmed skepticism and opened the door for conversation. Margaret felt a palpable shift in herself as the evening progressed. Each discussion deepened her sense of self, reinforcing that artistry was not about technical prowess alone but also about the soul poured into one's work. This acknowledgement of her individuality, a woman reigniting her creative flame against the backdrop of a fast-paced world, had cultivated not only respect but admiration. As the evening drew to a close, she glanced at her painting one last time. The chaos that had initially filled her heart now felt like a testament to her rebirth. The beauty of imperfection had unveiled a journey so deeply personal yet inviting to all who dared to embrace their vulnerability. She had weathered storms and emerged with solidity, each experience layering upon the last, creating a masterpiece of her existence. Margaret realized that she was no longer a ghost drifting through a world that seemed foreign. She was an integral part of a vibrant community, an artist with something vital to communicate. The once faint and fractured remnants of her passion burgeoned forth anew, igniting an unshakable truth: she belonged in this collection of voices clamoring for connection and expression. As the event came to an end, and attendees filtered out, Margaret stood alongside her artwork, a deep sense of fulfillment washing over her. She had not only conquered her inner turmoil but also created a space where others could find resonance in her story. With her heart swelling with newfound strength, she took a step forward, inviting each of those gathered to explore creativity together, transforming skepticism into collaboration and fear into connection. She was ready to embrace the next chapter of her artistic journey, armed with resilience and a passion to bridge generational divides. This was her moment, and she would carry the victory within her, a vivid emblem of triumph that transcended the canvas to shape her identity for years to come. Now is the time for you to take action. You need to subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show your support. Comment your reactions and theories about Margaret's inspiring journey. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful conclusion.